And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Talk Pop Podcast, episode 80 of today's show. Guys, it's a crazy Monday. I'm on spring break in the middle of the beginning of March, still working. Shouts out to Dan. And the NFL Combine just wrapped up. I believe it wrapped up last night, and it was a loaded event. I was really excited about how this combine turned out. I really love watching the combine each year. And now now we get to talk about it. Now I get to talk about it for at least 30 minutes tonight, at most 30 minutes tonight, and get everybody's thoughts. So joining us in the comment section, let us know. Feel free to tap in. We are one of, if not the most interactive show here in the Georgia space. We shout out every comment there is, as long as it's appropriate, and you want a bot, as we had a few weeks ago. But with that being said, Dan, how's your weekend going before we hop into hot topics?
My weekend, listen, the dead period is over. My son's activities and now my daughter's activities take up my entire weekend. I need a weekend from my weekend, and that's how it goes. So Mondays are extremely rough for me, on the go, nonstop. But I am here. If you're ever watching on video, I am tired. You can see it in my face. I'm tired. But listen, the things we do for our kids, we keep it going, right?
Absolutely. And with that, Dan, let's hop into the hot topics of the night. We got two tonight, both from Dan. This is Dan's baby, as I say. This is Dan's segment. I try to contribute when I can, whenever I see something on the block. But Dan comes up with these every day. I don't know how he does it. I don't know where he gets it from, but he comes up with them and keeps them fresh. So with that, Dan, number one, your favorite non-game athletic event. I'm curious to see your answer. I just started to understand what you mean by this question.
All right, so what we're talking about here when we say non-game, we're not talking about like your fundamental games, right? We're talking about like all-star events, like home run derby, skills competition, dunk contest, three-point shootout, anything like that. And obviously, pro day and the combine fall into this too, right? Because it's not a game, so it's not a game, but it's an event, right? Something that these athletes get to do something in, and for me growing up, obviously, it was always the slam dunk contest or the 3-point competition, and I still love those when they're good. A lot of times the NBA guys don't really want to do it anymore, so that's losing its luster. But for me, the thing that I always thought was freaking awesome was the Pro Bowl competitions. When they would have the quarterbacks with the accuracy challenges and the longest throw, that was awesome, and I always really, really enjoyed that. But for me, the one that takes the cake was the NHL All-Star Game, either the hardest shot or the one-on-ones, the breakaways with the goalies, because those guys got to show their flair and their just amazing talent. And if you don't know this about me, hockey is probably my favorite sport out of everything. I love hockey. It's near and dear to my heart, and I know I'm in a minority. Everybody hates hockey, but I, I love hockey. And the hardest shot was freaking awesome. And like I remember, I was at a practice. So the Thrashers used to practice right before our game started, and they would be on the ice. And Ilya Kovalchuk took a slap shot from the blue line, hit the back of the net, and it lifted his goal off its moorings. That's how hard he shot the freaking puck. So, like for me, Ray Bork, those guys like that, Al McInnes, I used to love to watch the hardest shot. That was always my favorite non-game, like the skill competition stuff like that. But the hardest shot was for me was that was the thing, and that I mean, boy, that was crazy.
I've actually never watched that, Dan. I never watched it, never seen it. I actually have watched a few minutes of hockey, but never really got into it. I don't know why. Maybe it's just there. I play lacrosse. I just never got into hockey. They're similar. Never got into it. But Dan, I'm gonna go to a different perspective with this one. And you mentioned it. The Pro Bowl contest, the drills they do, like skill challenges. I was looking for
Yes.
that word. Skill challenges. That's my favorite. I have recently kind of got into it. Search them out on YouTube. This year was the first year where I kind of watched it live, and I went into it, and I actually enjoyed myself for the hour it was on. I was like, man, nothing better than watching these guys do dodgeball. Like, really love watching them play dodgeball. They made their own dunk contest with the catching contest. I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Tuned in to it live first time this year, and just can't get enough of it.
And I think you're 100% right, Harrison. You're getting an opportunity to see guys who you have ultimate respect for. You know how talented they are, but now you get to see them do other things or do facets of what they do, and it's just a great illustration of how talented these guys really are. So again, you're right, 100% on the money. Those Pro Bowl competitions are amazing. But for a hot topic number two, I want you to go first because I always go first. So I want you to go first, and I don't want to take it off the table, but I think everybody universally has one particular thing as the greatest upset in sports history. But I want to know, in the world of Harrison Reno, what is the greatest upset in sports history in your mind?
Easily and real quick, then is this better? You said my audio was going on much better. Okay, uh, easily UMBC against Virginia, the 16 seed over the 1 seed. That will forever live in infamy with me. I will always remember that because it was like it's one of the most recent upsets, if the recent biggest upset in my mind. I don't know if I experienced it. I don't know if I experienced anything like it before. Just to me, when I go back and think about that game, and shoot, I would love to see how many of those players actually are still playing basketball today. Like any of
Right.
them go pro, just to see, because that Virginia team most definitely has some people. I believe Hunter was on that team. Was he not? I believe the Hawks player. I'm blanking on his first name.
On the
Hunter.
DeAndre Hunter
DeAndre Hunter. Was he not on that team?
on the Virginia
I feel
team.
like I remember him. Yeah, was he on that Virginia team back then?
I I don't know if he was or not because of all the one and done type deal. I know he was on the Virginia team that won the national championship.
Yeah, so it's always that when you say upset, that's the first thing that pops into my mind. So what about you, Dan? I'm curious. I don't know. You may have something here. You may go with Kentucky Derby route. You may be the wild card on us here. So Dan, who do you got?
All right, so I think universally, I think the greatest upset in the history of the world would be the United States men's hockey team in 1980 defeating the Soviets. And for context, if you don't know about that, the Soviets were a group that played together. They were professionals, and the rest of the world was amateurs, but they didn't have a professional hockey league, so they were allowed to play. And they would beat like NHL All Star teams like 14 to nothing. They was the most ridiculous talented team in the history of the world. And you had a bunch of 17, 18-year-old amateurs from the United States who were put together and they won it. They've made movies about it. I mean, it is arguably the greatest. Well, not arguably, it is the greatest upset of all time. But that is such low hanging fruit that I wanted to find something else and get off my screen with that Duke stuff, Zach. That's not cool. Um, but the greatest upset for me, and I don't know if you guys if this will resonate with you the way it resonated with me. Rudes, I know you're in here and I need you to back me up on this, Rudes, because you're going to know this one. 42 to 1. If anybody knows what 42 to 1 means, I would be seriously shocked. Rudes might. But as the odds on James Buster Douglas fighting Mike Tyson in Tokyo, and that fight was such a mismatch that no place in the United States would host that fight because it was a waste of time. Nobody in the world wanted to see Buster Douglas fight Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was invincible. The man couldn't be touched. He was literally knocking guys out in 20 seconds. I mean, it was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. I in my lifetime, I've never seen a fighter that was more devastating than Mike Tyson. I mean, I remember going to school and like I'm sure everybody had these things where you'd be like, if somebody gave you $1 million, would you get in the ring with Mike Tyson and take one of his punches for $1 million? And like my answer to that was no, because he's probably going to kill you with one punch. Like you're probably going to die. So you're basically saying, would your family take the $1 million for you to get in the ring with him? And I say all that to give you context that Mike Tyson was the most ungodly thing in the history of the world. And Mike Tyson doesn't take the fight seriously. James Buster Douglas's mother passes away days before the fight, and Buster Douglas beat the hell out of Mike Tyson for 7 rounds and or 8 rounds. I think it was the 8th round with the knockout. But I mean, none of us saw it live because it was a tape delay. And I remember waking up and the newspaper in big thing says Douglas is the champ. I was like, Somebody's losing their job because that's wrong. We didn't have the media cycle like we do now, but that for me, as the greatest upset of my lifetime. Granted, I was alive for the Olympics, but um, that Mike Tyson thing that was the most unreal thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I know I went way longer than you thought, but that's it.
I wasn't around for that fight. Never saw Tyson fight until a few years ago live when he was fighting whoever the heck he was fighting back then. I forget. Was it one of the Paul brothers he was fighting back in that little fight that little boxing match they had on pay per view? And the way I found out about Buster Douglas fight is actually through a hype video. They have a motivational like speech, and I don't know if it's Buster Douglas speaking per se, but it's that story of Buster Douglas and his mom died, and I believe the line was either you can die with your mother or go on and like have her live through you. And he knocks he knocks Mike Tyson out, and that's I'm gonna have to go digging through through the YouTube hole to go find it because I want to see that fight, and I'm sure there's a way to go back and watch it because I mean, like Dan said, it is probably the biggest boxing upset we've had in so long. I can't think of an MMA upset that was that big.
No, and then I mean, you have all of the boxing experts. I think Jim Lampley said that the 7th round of that fight was the greatest boxing round he's ever seen in his life. They were just throwing haymakers at each other. It was incredible. But I was hoping that Rudes would be on my side, but he's going with Tyson Holyfield. But I mean, I kind of expected Holyfield to win that fight because Tyson, I don't know, but up until that point, up until the point he lost to Buster Douglas, he was invincible. So like the thought of him losing never crossed my mind. So that's why it was such a devastating blow to a young Dan Kiley.
For me, Dan, keeping on the mixed martial arts topic, because obviously we're going with a different sport, different type of mixed martial arts, and we're just gonna know this one. That Mike Tyson upset for me, Dan, was when Chris Weidman knocked out or TKO'd Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, to me, growing up, was the guy. Obviously, he was the guy in the middleweight division in the UFC for years. Played around with his opponents all the time. Never really got caught. Always caught them before they caught him. And I will never forget my reaction where I was sitting when Anderson Silva, when Anderson Silva got TKO'd. Rudes, I know you're a UFC fan. You're gonna know about that one. Probably even watched that one live. I was at my grandparents' place because we all thought Anderson was going to win. That was just the assumption. Anderson was going to win. But transitioning over into Georgia content, let's talk about the combine real quick, Dan. We don't got much, obviously, because I think everybody is talking about the same thing now, so we don't want to run you into the ground with the same takes over and over again. But Dan, I want to start this off with just your general reactions, whether it's one player, two players, who you're upset with. We're going to get into the winners in a little bit, and it's like a four-player race, I believe it is, between who's the biggest winner, because I really can't handpick one because everybody has a case as to why they're the biggest winner.
My quickest takeaway is that the combine has turned into a 4-day infomercial for the University of Georgia. The last 3 or 4 years, Georgia players have showed up and showed out at the NFL combine. They have been absolutely outstanding. You have to give a lot of credit and a lot of roses to the Georgia Strength and Conditioning Camp. And then also these private trainers that these guys are going to, they're doing their work too. But the development that these players are getting is starting to really show, and is showing at a level that is actually lapping the field, if you will. What these guys collectively are doing. I mean, obviously guys can have one off here and one off there that they run well or they test well, but the collective, the Georgia collective, when is the last time that a Georgia player went to a combine and you were utterly disappointed with everything that they did? Now, does a player sometimes have a 40 that maybe you thought they would be a little bit faster? Okay, that's fine. Maybe a vertical wasn't as high as you thought. I don't know. I don't know that many of us track verticals to begin with. The Underwear Olympics was kind of a joke, but Georgia has turned the Underwear Olympics into a billboard, a giant billboard for everyone to see. Says if you want to get to the next level and you want to be developed at a level unlike any other school is doing, come to Georgia. And that's my biggest takeaway of the this combine and last year's combine as well, is that it has turned into an infomercial, and Kirby Smart has to be sitting at home watching this on TV play out and just licking his chops because he knows he can walk into a living room and say, hey, by the way, did you see that number one high school player in the country that everybody said was a bust? And then, he stays and he does it the Georgia way. And then he goes to the combine and absolutely blows it up. Yeah, that's because he came to Georgia. Oh, and he tells you that you should probably come to Georgia too. So, I mean, just roses, baby. Just roses.
I wish we had I wish we had the ability to play the Nolan Smith interview. I was on the road traveling back home when that came out, and I saw Dan's tweet pop up because I got Dan's tweets on notifications. Which, by the way, if you don't have Dan Kiley on notifications, do it and you'll thank me later. Pops up, I click on it, and I'm like, holy crap! He just gives a promo out of nowhere, just a full stone cold Steve Austin promo, just his take on the University of Georgia, and it's probably one of the best advertisements that Georgia can have. I mean, shouts out the new facilities, shouts out the new locker rooms, just lays it all out in front of you like, hey, this is the reason to go to University of Georgia. And I'm excited to see if there's going to be anyone that kind of, they probably might not say it out loud, but people are definitely watching.
Well, he shouts out bones and says, we're eating steak. We're eating lobster. I mean, tell me that if you're not a 16, 17-year-old kid and you're sitting at your house and you're having macaroni and cheese for the third time this week, you're like, hold up, time out. I get to go have steak and lobster every day? Like, say less. I'm in.
Yeah, and just obviously look what Nolan Smith did for himself at the Combine this week. In some cases, a lot of what people were talking about in Nolan Smith, and in my experience covering the Cowboys and covering the NFL right now, Nolan Smith was talked about as a sleeper of a first-round pick. Because as Dan said, everybody calls him a bust because he doesn't have 17 sacks, career sacks. He doesn't have the 11 sacks a season that Will Anderson had or Tyree Wilson has, who's arguably probably the two best edge rushers in this class. But now people have gone back, turned on the tape, and said, holy crap, this dude has the traits of, forgive me for this, this is the only one I know who is like, when they talk about Nolan Smith as a player and his traits, NFL traits, they say, oh my God, he has the bendiness, the twitchiness of a young Von Miller, but he doesn't have that production. He has the speed, he has the ability, shows a lot of the things on tape that Von Miller did coming out. So we're at an interesting point, Dan, because more than ever, it's like, holy crap, the Combine means so much, can do so much. And then in other cases, it's like your NFL, your college career doesn't matter. I mean, Will Levis is not a first-round pick based off of production, is what my opinion is. But Nolan Smith's going to be a first-round pick, it seems like.
Well,
in spite of his college.
I would say this one thing in relation to the Georgia players and their lack of stats, so to speak, is that Kirby went out of his way last year to talk about how his players are not going to have the same level of stats as other guys because they're asked to do certain things. They're very unselfish. And then they also rotate multiple guys in. And so they're not in there as many snaps as these guys from these other locations. So I think Kirby has done a good job of safeguarding his players where he can explain why. And the other part of that too is that these defenses have been so good and so dominant that he does have the ear of a lot of these NFL scouts because they're obviously coming around saying, hey, tell me what we're doing here. Tell me what we're doing here. And I mean, obviously guys share ideas all the time, right? So because they have been so successful, what he says carries more weight. So if a guy like Kirby or Dan Lanning before he left or Glenn Schumann or Muschamp, if one of those guys says, hey, listen, this guy is capable of doing X, Y, Z. However, in our system, we're not asking him to do all of those certain things. So will he translate to what you want? Absolutely. We just didn't ask him to do that. And I really think Trayvon Walker going number one last year really set the groundwork for that because that was the biggest argument looming over his head was that he didn't have the production that some of these other guys did. However, the NFL executives listened to the information coming out of Athens and they applied it to him. And they saw what they saw in the Combine. They saw what they saw on the tape, but they're also realizing that maybe he was capable of doing more. And he didn't necessarily have the best stats as a rookie. I don't think he won Rookie of the Year for defense. I don't think he did. But I, if you call him a bust, you're being ridiculous because he's a defensive lineman. They're not going to pile up stats. I mean, there's one Aaron Donald, and there's a reason why everybody knows who Aaron Donald is because there's freaking one of them. But I think overall the success of the UGA program and now the numbers that they're putting up, I think it alleviates that argument of they didn't have the production. That's my take.
Yeah, and with Smith, it's all, in the NFL especially, it's about, okay, you may not have the sacks in college, but I want the guy who can get to the quarterback, and I believe it's 2.5 seconds is the average time to throw in the NFL. That is the average time, 2.5 seconds, I believe. And Nolan Smith has showed he can get to the quarterback in 2.5 seconds. He has a lot of pressures. He racked up the pressures. You go watch him on tape, he gets pressures, but when teams are facing Georgia in college and they're outmatched up front, like majority of the teams, 99% of the teams Georgia plays in the regular season are outmatched up front, they're going to get the ball out quick. They're going to game plan not to allow a Nolan Smith to hit their quarterback and sack them. And I'm really excited to see where Nolan Smith ends up because for him, he has not played all the he didn't play all the snaps. I believe he played, I want to say he played, if I remember correctly, thanks to PFF. We were talking about this months back before the combine even started. Nolan Smith played 22 snaps against Oregon. 22 snaps. Like he plays probably not even a fourth or maybe just a fourth of the snaps in a full game. Like that's his, he's a specialized pass rusher. And is he going to be a 4-down or a 3-down pass rusher in the NFL? Maybe. I don't know. It depends on where he goes. But right now he's at least going to be a specialized pass rusher.
And I'm 100% with you, Zach. There are times where what's available from the Georgia Bulldog Collective maybe doesn't fit what the Falcons need. Defensive pass rush, offensive line are two of the biggest areas of need for the Falcons. If Broderick Jones or Carter are on the board and they don't take either one of them, I will go full time somebody else too, because it's just ridiculous. But I'm a hater. What do I know?
Dan, let's talk biggest winner here. It's tough. I don't have a big winner. I don't know if we can. It's tough because it's like, okay, who jumps up off the board like Trayvon Walker did.
So here's the way I think you have to look at this. Okay, is biggest winner. What were they prior to the combine, and what are they now after the combine? I think the majority of people that I listened to, NFL people anyway, had Broderick Jones in the first round. Maybe not as high as he's looking at now, but they had him there. Stetson, I don't know that he moved all that much, even though we'll talk about him in just a second. But I don't think he could have done any better, really. And I don't think that there's anything he could have done to change people's minds. I mean, he could have ran a 2-second 40 and they still probably would hate on him. Darnell Washington, I think, is such a freak. And he performed the way that we all thought that he would. I know that the NFL Combine people, Daniel Jeremiah and, oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name, the host.
Rich Eisen.
I know that they were blown away, but I think pretty much everybody that's watched him play knew what he was capable of. So I think you have to go with Nolan Smith because, like you said, he had limited tape this year. There was some conversation around him maybe sliding into the first round. And I still see mock drafts where he's not in the first round. The one that I was looking at today, I think it's the 33rd team or something like that. I can't remember what they're called, but they still have him going in the second round, the second pick of the second round. But I think Nolan Smith really is the biggest winner out of all of this because there's so much conversation around him. And I really feel like if he's going to move into the first round, this is what did it. Because I don't think that his tape alone was going to get him there. So this, along with his tape, and like you said to start the show or start the segment, was that's a flip the tape back on moment. We've heard other people say that. Brooks has said that too. That's the, hey, what you just did not match what I had in my head. I have to go back and watch. And I think that's really what's going to propel him into the first round. So I think he has to be the biggest winner if you look at it under those pretexts.
Yeah, and like you said, with Stetson, it's the thing with Stetson is, I think obviously the height is one of them, and I think, Dan, I don't get it. I don't know what the concern is. Maybe it's just a streaky, kind of inconsistent play at times where one moment he looks like, oh yeah, that's a day 2 quarterback, and another moment it's like this guy isn't draftable. Like he plays up and down, and his Ohio State kind of disappeared. I mean, he didn't look great in the third quarter. He turned on the tape in the fourth quarter. Oh my God, this is what we've seen all year, and I don't know what it is. He made all the throws possible. Like he looked good doing it. The only set of throws where it's like, damn, was the fades, was the end zone fades. That was the only ones that he missed for whatever reason. But everything else, the deep ball was where he was going to make his money. Those deep ball throws, I mean, those 15-yard posts, skinny posts, like he had to hit those. He had to. Those were NFL big boy throws, and he made them.
Well, the one thing I would say about the time, you talking about the end zone fades and stuff like that. Those are all timing routes. Those are routes that you have to have great timing and a great connection with the wide receivers. I think the guys who are able to complete them at a high level during the combine, for lack of a better term, got lucky. I mean, because there's so much of that goes into just repping that to be able to get it perfect. I don't know necessarily that an NFL scout is going to really ding you hard for not being money on those, because those take time and those you can get better at. I mean, your ability to throw it downfield, right? I mean, you can improve that some. Your timing and your ability to hit timing routes, or like crossing routes as digs and slants and stuff like that. Like you can improve on that a little bit, but you kind of are what you kind of are. And those were some of the concerns that people had about, like Josh Allen, for example, massive arm, but does he have the ability to touch, right, to fit it in? Listen, I'm going to go back to what I said all the time. There's nothing Stetson could have done because he's taller than Bryce Young, but height is the concern. But you don't have a concern about Bryce Young. He's faster than Bryce Young, but you're concerned about his athleticism, but not Bryce Young's athleticism. He wins at a higher level than Bryce Young, but you don't hold that against Bryce. I mean, I don't understand. I don't get it. Like I know Bryce Young is a good quarterback, but the only thing I can come up with, the only reason. Well, there's two is one because he wasn't highly recruited, okay? But there's been so many players that have gone in the draft and done extremely well that weren't highly. I mean, Antonio Brown. I mean, who is he? Chad Ochocinco. All these guys were at junior colleges. Nobody wanted them. Josh Allen begged everybody in the world to take him, and nobody would take him. The only school that would give him a chance was Wyoming. I mean, so miss me with that. The only other thing I can come back to is his attitude. Now, his attitude is partly what's responsible for him being successful. You understand why he has an attitude because people have been shitting on him for his entire life. However, a quarterback is the face of the franchise. We have covered this a couple different times. This is Dan talking. This isn't Harrison. This isn't anybody else. This is Dan talking. As a quarterback, you're the face of the franchise. If you have a sourpuss attitude, if you don't know how to act at certain times, they take that. And that's really, really important to them. And I know all the Georgia fans, I know you, Jonathan Jeremiah, you don't care anything about that. And every time I bring it up, I'm hating on Stetson. I'm not hating on the guy Stetson. I think Stetson, part of what makes him successful is that attitude of the me against the world, F you mentality. That makes him successful. However, you have to have that switch where you can be a professional and you can turn it on and that magnetism and get people to buy tickets, get people to sell ads. You have to have that. And he's kind of gone out of his way to be against that. And I don't know where that's coming from. I hope it can resolve itself. I really think if he's given an opportunity in the right situation, he could be really, really successful. And again, I don't know physically what else he could do. He did everything he could do. He measured as high as he could possibly measure in height. He did everything he could possibly do. Oddly enough, the one thing that we haven't heard about him is he's got small hands. I mean, that's the only other thing. That's the only other thing that they usually criticize quarterbacks for that we haven't heard. So we've heard he's not athletic enough. He's proved them wrong. We heard he can't throw the football. He's proved them wrong. He couldn't win. He's proved them wrong. Stetson has done everything to prove them wrong. The only other thing that could possibly be laid at his feet would be his attitude. And I haven't really heard anybody mention that, but I think that's part of it. That's me trying to come up with something.
And speaking of hands, he has 10-inch hands, Dan. 10-inch. I think Bryce was. I don't remember. I don't know if Bryce even measured in hands wise, but Stetson has 10-inch hands and he's 5'11". He's taller than Bryce Young, as Dan said. And I'm looking on his NFL Network profile. They got him prospect rated as 6'0 flat, 6 flat. He has, and the description for that, Dan, is traits or talent to be above average backup. And I mean, hey, I'm not saying he's going to be a starting quarterback. I don't think he will be a starting quarterback right out of college. I think he may get the opportunity, depending on where his situation is, to go down the road and be a starting quarterback at some points in his career. But I do think the people who think he's going to be selling your insurance in a couple of years, I don't see it. I really don't see it. And I think he's going to have a good career in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to play 10 years. I don't know if he's been in the league for 10 years, but I do think he has 3 or 4 years as a pro backup. And, if he does have to go prove himself on the practice squad for a little bit, then I have confidence that he will do well, because that's where he got his start at Georgia. That's where he gained his credibility, was on the scout team. So to me, I'm excited to see where this goes. And to your point, Dan, physically, there's nothing else he could do. He did it all. But I think there's one thing that GMs and even media members maybe kind of question and look back on. It's, we would have loved him to see. We would have loved to see him in the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl and go play, glorified 11-on-11 football. Not really, but it is kind of the college Pro Bowl in a sense, where it is the first look for scouts to look at everybody, look at some of these prospects in a neutral setting, in a place where there is no talent disparity. So I would have loved to see him in the Senior Bowl. I think he would have played well, and that's the only thing on my mind that I think could hurt him. But then again, it's up to the prospect and it's up to the individual, as in, like, really whether or not he wants to do it and he can do it. So
Well,
he said to the media he had some things pop up that made it probably not in his best interest. So I'm gonna take his word for it.
Well, what I would also say there is part of the reason that he didn't want to do the Senior Bowl was because he wasn't included. He wasn't even considered until multiple people had already opted out or passed it down. And that was an insult to him. In his mind, he felt like, and I believe he's on record, maybe not, but I mean, same with, I believe as Will Levis was also the other one who, but again, that kind of goes back to the attitude, the me against the world, the FU mentality, where he's like, well, if you're not going to pick me first, then I don't want anything to do with it. And I can partly understand that. There's plenty of tape of what he was able to do against really good competition. So, I think you're right, Harrison, when you say there's nothing left physically he could have done. And I would have loved to seen him in the Senior Bowl as well. However, I'm petty to an extent, and I understand if that was the mentality that he didn't want to participate because he wasn't their first choice. I kind of get it. I mean, what else did he have to do? He's the best, the MVP of the last 2 national championship. I mean, I'm with you. Double barrel Johnny Estrada to the Senior Bowl.
So I never gave my winner, but I'm going to go with Dan. I think Nolan Smith is probably the biggest winner from fringe first round to now. It looks like he's probably going to be a top 20 draft pick at, probably a top 20 draft pick, maybe top 25. Some people in the media who cover the Cowboys are saying that they don't even know if he'll be there at 26 when the Cowboys pick. And I believe him. I mean, he ran a really good time. He has some traits on tape that are going to make scouts fall in love. Maybe not Anthony Richardson, Will Levis type of fall in love, but he is going to get drafted. And I think it's probably going to be a first round. And as Dan spoke about earlier, Darnell Washington, another one who, really showed up, kind of went viral twice. One was on the blocking sled, and then on the one-hand catch and the end zone fades. Man, what a catch. And I saw this, Dan. Somebody commented under the video. He said, oh, my God, he's a spandex warrior. And then I saw him get body on the timeline by I forget the media outlet, but they retweeted it and took, I believe it was the catch versus Missouri or Vanderbilt. He had a one-hand catch up against the sideline and says, oh, yeah, he can do it in pads too. I'm like, well, wow, we're just dropping bodies on the timeline like it's nothing. What were your thoughts on Darnell Washington? I didn't think he was going to run below a 4.7. I thought he was probably going to be a 4.7 runner. I was right wrong.
Well, we kept hearing how fast he was, and so it wasn't an absolute shock to me. And I believe I said on our show last week that I thought he would have a good 40 time because I was like, a guy who's 6'7". Well, I think that's the biggest shocker is we've been told this man is 6'7", 6'8" forever and ever and amen, and they say he's 6'6" and 3/4. However, he's standing next to another guy who they said was 6 and 6/3. He's a whole inch taller. So I guess their measurements aren't exact. But you're absolutely right here. The commentators gushed over Darnell Washington. They had every right to be. The part for me, I mean, the catch was the catch. His fluidity, all of that stuff looked great. But when he hit the sled, bro, come on, that was different. That was so different. He hit that sled, and it looked like it weighed 8 pounds. Like, how we just gonna pretend that this thing doesn't weigh like 500 pounds? You got these other, first round NFL tight ends that are barely moving it the 5 yards that's required. Darnell hits that thing and pushes it into 5. Like, I think Rich Eisen said, "Oh my God, he's going to score a touchdown with it." I mean, it was, bro. That out of everything that I saw this entire weekend, out of everything I saw, Darnell hitting that sled was the one time where I was like, "Oh my God." That was it for me. Because if you've ever hit a one-man sled, what he just did made you feel like you were this big. Because I was like, oh my God. Like, bro, I'm out of gas when I push that thing 5 yards. And he just like hit it like it was nothing. I was just blown away at how easy that was. Blown away.
I want to talk about before we wrap it up because I told Dan I kind of wanted to go 30 minutes and then we can cut it loose. I want to talk about some of the ones that we talked about the winners here, and probably the biggest winner, as we both agree, Nolan Smith. And I'm not gonna say they're losers because I don't think they are losers. I just think they.
Bobby Beal helped himself a lot too.
Bobby Beal, man, I don't know how that dude ran a 4.48. Don't know how he did it. Never like Brooks said on his show. Never thought he was a 4.4 guy, and shoot, he proved everybody wrong. But I want to talk about three prospects individually, or really just two. Well, we could do three. Three prospects individually, Dan. First, Kiley Ringo. I don't think he hurt or he helped himself, really. I mean, 4.36, that's a good time. Really good time. Now, I think the expectations were set a lot higher on Kiley than they should have been, and that's not his fault. I just think that's the Georgia's fan base getting everybody like in their mind, oh my God, he's going to run a 4.2, somewhere in the 4.2s. I don't think that was ever going to be true. I refuse to believe that Kiley or anybody in Keeley's camp was putting that out there that he was running a 4.2. So 4.36, a great time. I believe he is top 3, top 4 fastest corners in the class. Ran faster than Christian Gonzalez, who's a top 10 draft pick. But the one thing that's holding him back, and Dan has talked about this at length on here, is he's always in phase, but it's once the ball is thrown, that's where it kind of gets messy for him. The time in his jumps, and even to an extent flipping his hips, and getting downfield is where he kind of gets in trouble. So I'm curious to see where he lands. I think he's probably going to be a second round draft pick, but I don't know, Dan, if he slides into the first round.
Well, Kiley Ringo, I think, has a really good chance of going in the first round. And, the other thing, too, is coming out of high school, I believe he was documented at a 10.2 100, which is world-class sprinter speed. And that's not some high school coach holding a stopwatch. That was U.S. Olympic trials, if I'm not mistaken, where he ran like a 10.2. So the guy is an elite burner. But the one thing, Jonathan and Jeremiah, we have a group text that we're all in. And I was talking about, well, first of all, we're throwing around these times 4.3s and 4.4s like that ain't elite fast. Like, you get out of here with that. 4.2, 4.3 is ungodly. Like, you're running a 4.36, that is ungodly fast. You can get out of here with he's not as fast as I thought he would be. It's a 4.36, dude. Get the hell out of here. I mean, you don't have. It's insane fast. So let's set the bar there, okay? Anything 4.4 or better is insanely fast, like ungodly fast. So if you're 4.4 or under, you can get it done. The one thing that Keeley's got in his favor is he's a big ass corner. Is he 6'2", maybe 6'3"? It's 6'2", right? Am I not mistaken, Harrison? 6'2".
I'd have to go look at the. Yeah,
I think he's like 6'2",
somewhere around there.
But he's over 200 pounds, and he's built like a freaking Mack truck. Kiley is big and strong, So he's big and strong, and he can run that fast. And if he doesn't work out at corner, you could move him to a safety because I think he can hit hard enough to be a safety. His body's big enough to be a safety. So I really think the margin of error with somebody like Kiley Ringo, as big as he is, as fast as he is a lot wider than you would have with a like Sauce Gardner. Amazing, right? Super fast, super elite, had an outstanding year, right? But he is not that big. Like he's not like yoked up or whatever. Like so, if you missed on him, like you just missed on him. But anyway, I don't know why you can't super chat, Rude. I have no idea. That's a Harrison question. But I think the window.
I have to look into that.
The window for Kiley Ringo, I think, is a lot bigger than a lot of the other corners where he's so big and strong and fast. There are a lot of different things you can do with him, and I think he can contribute right away. So, oh, look at Rudes. We love you, Rudes.
Yeah, Rudes. I'll look into that. I don't think we've had a super chat on here. So hey, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Maybe it's turned off. Maybe I need to. Maybe something needs to be done. Maybe a setting needs to be flipped. I'll look into that and let y'all know. But we'd really appreciate that. And hey, as y'all know, we love the people that come in here and give us the attention and give us their time to come listen to us. Next prospect, Dan, Christopher Smith ran a 4.62, and thing Brooks talked about all week long heading up into this was he needed to put on some weight and run fast. The expectations I don't think were set very high for Chris Smith. I don't think he disappointed people or really got people excited. Man, that dude's going to play in the league. And I really do believe that he can go play in the league for a long time and be a starting safety. So I really don't know how much this will affect his draft stock or drastically affects his draft stock. I don't see him dropping out of day 2. I think that's where he is. Now, if he came out here and ran a 4.5, 4.4, I think he'd be a first round conversation. He'd be the Lewis Scene type deal where it's like, oh my God, we got to get this dude on day 1. So I don't know if he's going to go day 1, but man, is he talented. Man, I'm going to love watching him. A crazy comp that I saw, it was from a Seahawk fan talking about him being the replacement for Quandre Diggs just because he can play that post safety. He can play on an island up there in the middle of the field by himself. He showed that at Georgia. And I was like, man, that's a high comp, but I can see what they were getting at with that. So I really don't know with Chris Smith. I think he's going to be a good NFL player. It's just all about how this affects his stock.
Well, Christopher Smith, I think the one thing that you can say in his to his benefit is that he plays faster than what the 4.62 says. I don't recall off the top of my head without going back and looking at all the tape. I don't recall him getting burned. I don't recall him being slow to react. I don't recall him being, not being able to chase somebody down or anything like that. So I think he plays fast enough. When you play in the SEC, you're playing against a lot of really fast guys, really talented guys. I think that tape speaks volumes to the NFL experts. Did he hurt himself running the 4.62? I mean, I guess probably a little bit, but I think that whenever these executives turn on the tape and they watch Chris Smith, they're going to fall in love with him because he hits hard. He has great reaction. He has great instincts. And for me, anyway, he always seemed to make big plays when Georgia needed him the most. So I think in many instances, what these guys do at the combine is very, very helpful. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to go back to the tape and see stuff that can translate. And I think there is plenty of tape for Chris Smith that translates to the NFL. And I think an NFL executive would not have a hard time of watching his film and seeing how he would fit into their system. I mean, there are plenty of guys who get a lot of hype, but when you go watch their film, you're like, man, I really don't know if he's going to be able to do this at the next level. But when I watch Christopher Smith, I never feel like that he's just a college guy. I feel like he could do it at the NFL level. Maybe not Lewis Scene, because Lewis Scene was insane. But I think he's really, really good, and I think he can be on the back end of somebody's secondary.
Last one, Dan. I want to talk about Kenny McIntosh. We talked about it pre-show. He was bottom 3 in the 40-yard dash among the running backs. Now, granted, a lot of these running backs were running insanely fast times, and Kenny McIntosh was never really known as a burner, my goal for him was, hey, you can't run anything above a 4.7. You have to run below 4.7. You have to run around 4.6. For me, that was what I wanted Kenny McIntosh to run. And by God, he ran 4.6 too. So I wasn't disappointed with him. I would have loved, like, we would love for all of these guys to run insanely fast time, but that's not realistic. And for Kenny McIntosh, it's, he was going to have to go show what he did on tape and go out there and be a receiving back. Go out there, catch the football, look really good doing it, and run those routes really well. And he did that. So I don't know if 40 times all too important with him. I think he's going to find a match. I don't know exactly where people are mocking him to be. I think maybe he's at worst a day 3 running back. And man, there are some teams out there that are going to want Kenny McIntosh and are going to drool over him because of what he can do as a receiver, similar to what James Cook did. Now, James Cook ran a really good 40 time, and that's what boosted James Cook to go where he went. And Kenny McIntosh, I think, kind of like Nolan Smith, it's going to be, you're going to go look on tape and say, wow, like, that's special. That's special.
And that's where I fall on this one too, is that I have been a big Kenny Mac homer on this show. I've said it multiple times. He was my favorite running back of that entire stable that we had this past year. I think he's an excellent back. I thought that he would run a faster time. I thought he would be in the 4.5s. And he still has an opportunity to do that at his pro day, maybe get it down to like a 4.55, 4.56, somewhere in there. And if he does that, that would be really, really beneficial. But if you're telling me that Kenny McIntosh is going to be a late 3rd to a 4th round pick, I mean, that is extreme value in my opinion, because he's durable. He's got great vision. He can handle the load. He takes hits well. He doesn't fumble the football. He catches it well out of the backfield. He does everything that you want. Maybe he doesn't have that high-end blazing speed, but how many running backs really do these days? Chris Johnson is probably the last running back that I can remember that was just blazing fast. But the running game has changed in such a way that you don't have guys breaking off 60, 70-yard runs all the time anymore. I mean, most of these NFL backs are getting 20-yard runs at the most, and that's the biggest runs that they're going to get. For me, as a Falcons fan, I would love to see the Falcons take a flyer on him late in the 3rd or in the 4th round, because I know we got some extra picks there too. If you're able to get him, that is extreme value. I mean, is it necessarily a high need? No, but I would love to see, him being paired up with the guy that you have a man crush on, Algiers or whatever his name is. But I think he'd be a great compliment back for the Falcons to have. And I think there are plenty of other teams as well that are going to find value in Kenny McIntosh late in the draft. Harrison loves putting me on solo screen.
Well, my internet is crapping out. I don't even know if you can hear me right now.
Yeah, you're good.
So
you're fine.
That's my
you're fine.
cue to wrap up. Okay. Well, yeah. So to add on to what Dan said then, in that case, the big thing for Kenny Mac is on tape, he's going to have to show the ability to make defenders miss. Like when it's one-on-one between him and a defensive back, he needs to make them miss. And that's what Bijan Robinson does really well. He makes people miss in space. Jahmyr Gibbs, what he does really well is he has elite speed. He has really good speed. Same thing with David Achane. Archain. Dang, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. I don't care. Got to be able to make people miss. And does he go through arm tackles? Does he get tackled easily? Does he get bring to the ground easily? So those are the 2 things I think for Kenny McIntosh are going to make or break his stock. And I mean, to me, when I went back and watched him, he looks really good. He showed the ability to make people miss. He showed the ability, to not get brought down on first contact. He can kind of fight through those arm tackles. Now, hey, I know he fell down, had a huge rushing touchdown if he didn't fall down, but that I blame that on the announcer's jinx, the announcer's curse, calling a touchdown when he's on the 10-yard line.
Right.
But I'm really excited to see where all these guys are at come draft time. And Georgia's Pro Day is, I don't know the exact date for it. I'm assuming it's probably later this month. Going to be an exciting day. And by the way, folks, we haven't seen Jalen Carter, and obviously there was his incident. He got a warrant from Athens Clarke County that came out the day that he was set to speak to the media, that it pulled him back to Athens to go deal with that process. I have nothing to say on that. I'm going to let that play out. And I mean, it is what it is. So I hope the truth comes to light and everything that happens with that, is dealt with, because that's I kind of get emotional even talking about it at this point, that whole situation. And Roots, as for your topic you brought up today about Super Chat, guys, we have to get to 1,000 subscribers to even be able to have Super Chats on the channel. So let that be a challenge to you to share the show, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and keep coming back for more. Right now, until further notice, until probably next fall, we are every Monday at 7:30. I had to push it back a little late today. I was out running errands with the family. Wasn't able to sit down and do the show notes until a little bit later than usual. So that's why we're here at 8 o'clock. And hey, y'all showed up. Y'all are still here. Dan, tell them where they can find you. Then we'll close it out.
I'm Twitter. It's at Dan Kiley 3, and or follow me. Be interactive. I don't get much interaction, but listen, Harrison said it. It's a challenge to you guys. Help us let this thing grow. We love what we're doing, but we want to get bigger. We want to be better. We want criticism. If you have something to say, let us know. Keep it clean if you can. But we want the criticism. We want the show to grow. We want to know what you guys want to hear, what you want to see, what you want to talk about. Do you want to have some guests on? What do you want? We want to grow and help us get over 1,000 subscribers. That would be amazing.
Absolutely. And just gonna put this out there. We hit 100 subscribers. Once we hit 100 subscribers, we'll do another call-in show. We'll do another hop on here and we'll talk to some people. This time we'll try and schedule it in advance as to who will call in and talk to us about it. So 100 subscribers, we are hitting y'all up, and y'all can come determine what we're talking about. Dan and I will scrap the show notes and go completely off of what y'all want for that show. So with that being said, Dan, episode 80 of the Talk podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Reno, co-host Dan Kiley, right back alongside me. I will be back in my studio next week in my normal setting, so we won't have the blurred background, because this is not the place for I wouldn't say it's the more professional environment background. So hey, I'm excited to get back and to have my mic in front of me and all the setup, and to see Dan's face without lagging every 20 seconds here on my end with the internet. So with that being said, guys, we'll see you next week, Monday at 7:30. It's gonna wrap it up for the Talk podcast.
As always, go Dogs!